Hi, I'm Justin Snedden from the AR team at Niantic, and today I'm going to walk you through a basic placement example. I'm going to assume that you've already set up your scene and you followed our basic setup guide to get to this point where you have a default Unity setup that can run on device. So if you haven't done that already, please go and look at our documentation or watch the basic setup guide and get to a point where you have a working scene. So let's jump into this. Today what we'll do is make a very simple example of placement, putting cubes on the floor in your room. So here we go. First thing we want to do is create a folder, just to hold our scene. I'll just call this placement. In here we will add a new scene. We'll call this placement. I'm doing it this way because if you're following through all the tutorials, you can just keep reusing this project and just make more folders, one for each tutorial. So let's open this, and here we go. We've got empty scene, doesn't have anything in it. The first thing we want to do is select the camera, and you want to change this from skybox to solid color and set it to a black background. We do this because we'll be replacing the background, and this helps us with that. So there we go. That's the main changes you need to make on the camera. In order to do a placement tutorial, we'll need a few of our helpers. So within the ARDK, there are various managers and helpers that can build a bunch of the content you need for you. So things like detecting planes, working out how to use semantics, rendering the scene, positioning the camera based on where your phone is. So what we'll do first in this case is, well, we need to render, so we'll need a rendering manager, and we need a camera position helper so that when you move the phone, everything lines up properly. So add component, and we'll call this rendering manager, if I spell it correctly, rendering manager. So we want one of those, and then we want a camera position helper. So one of these. So just open these two up while you're doing them. You always want to check that that it has detected the camera. If it hasn't, just go ahead and select it. So now this script will make sure that our phone and Unity sync up when the phone moves, and this script will handle all of the rendering of digital objects and the removal of background and replace it with camera footage and all the things that you need it to do. The next thing that we want to do is add an AR session manager. So that is the manager that will kick in to set everything up and make it run. So you could make a hierarchy in here and put objects wherever you like. I'm just going to keep putting them on the camera so that it's straightforward and simple. So in here we want a session manager. So AR session manager. And again, you can open this up. It will add a capability checker. This is just making sure that it turns on or off the correct features based on the device you're using. You can leave all of these as the default settings. The only thing to take note of when you're looking at these is there's this manage using the Unity lifecycle. If this is on, it means that the managers you drop in will just start working as soon as this scene loads. And the managers themselves will take care of destroying any objects, enabling and disabling things. So for your first run through, it's probably worth just leaving these on, getting things working. And then later on you may, depending on how your game flow needs to go, when you want to turn on and off AR, you'll probably start with these off, and then you'll manually enable them with an enable features call, which will be covered in later tutorials. So now that we've got the session manager in to our scene, we can think about how we're going to actually place things. So in order to place various objects in the scene, we need to detect planes. So luckily we also have a manager that can do that as well, so we can add in a plane manager, so AR plane manager here. So one of the nice things about ARDK is that you can actually inspect any of the scripts. So if you open this up, you can actually look through what these things are doing over time once you get better at working with the system. But for now, we're just going to put in the component and let it do its thing. Again, sorry, I accidentally ticked that off. We want that on so that it will start. This setting here is if you want the plane manager to actually draw something. So when it detects a plane, you want to be able to see that it's detected a plane. We have in the assets folder a prefab for that. So I'll just put that in there. So there's this one here, which is called the plane prefab. If you put this one in here, it'll draw this grid effect that you see here on any planes that it detects. So once this is done, you now have essentially the ability to detect a plane, but you can't place anything on it. There's a few bits and bobs you may want to do if you're running on Android at the moment. You need to add a permission Android permission requester is what the script is called. It will just allow you to do things like in here, if you set this to 1, just ensure that we have asked for usage of the camera. For iOS, you did that in the actual settings. You went in and said, you filled in the usage string. This is the Android equivalent of that. So if you are running on Android, remember to do that. I'm not, but it doesn't hurt to have it in the scene anyway. So that's the majority of the first parts of the setup. The next thing that you're going to need to do is add in the hit testers and the cursor renderers. So at the moment we'll have a scene that does nothing. So if I just save this and run it in the editor, it's just going to be a blank screen basically. The reason why the Skydome came back, even though we set it to be black, is you can see that there's this mock device has popped in. So everything we do in ARDK has mocking systems, which means we can run them in the editor, which will also set that up too. So we'll set up a fake scene where we can test everything before we try to run it on device, but we'll get to that in a second. All right, let's come back. We need to add a few more things. So as part of the setup for this scene, you've imported the ARDK itself. If you haven't already, go ahead and import the examples too, because the examples have a few bits and pieces that we're just going to use here because they've already been written. So there's an AR hit tester component, and there is a AR cursor rendering component that essentially encapsulate everything you need to do to place a prefab. So the cursor renderer will put a cube wherever in the center of the camera on whatever plane it finds, and the hit tester will do the if you click the screen, do a line test, hit the plane, and place the cube there. You could write all of this code, but for this example, we're just going to place in these existing components, and you can dig through them to see how we wrote that code at a later point. So let's go ahead and add a cursor renderer. So AR cursor renderer, if we add one of these, you'll see it's asking for a few things. So we just say, hey, I need a camera. There you go. And cursor object, it's just saying, well, what should I place as the cursor? So we can just find in here a small cube, and we can have, whatever color you like. Let's go for a small green cube is going to be our cursor in the scene. Again, if we run this, it's still not going to do anything because there's nothing to hit. But while I'm here, let's add the other script at the same time. So let's add an AR hit tester. So this script. And what this one does is, as I said before, it does a line test. If it hits a plane, it'll place a cube at that plane based on where you've clicked. Whereas the renderer will always put a single cube in the middle of the camera where it's looking, so it'll follow around with the camera. This one will place a new cube every time you click. So this is why it's asking for what prefab do you want here, and we can do the same again. We can look in the scene and say, so look at the assets and say, another small cube. Let's go for a plain white cube this time. Hit depth type, it's fine to leave that. Actually, yeah, we can say we want to hit everything. So we don't care if it's walls or floors or whatever, any type of plane. And just check that the settings on that one are fine. Great, so those two in. So now what we have is a scene that would work on your phone, but because it takes a little, well, we could run on the editor now, but instead of doing that, I'm just going to set up the mocking scene so we can run it in the editor, and then we'll test on the phone after that. So if you haven't set up the mocking scene before, essentially all this is any geometry you want to place into your scene, we can put it in a hidden layer, and we use that hidden layer to pretend that that was the real world geometry that our system had returned. So if you search, if you've imported the examples and you search in here for the mock-up scene. This is just a little room that we ship with the ARDK that you can use. You don't have to use this. You can build your own. It's nothing. There's nothing fancy. As you can see, it's a table and 4 walls and a couple of objects. The nice thing about this though is any of these objects they're on this layer here called mock world layer. If you don't have that, just go add and create it. It's here in our layer 8 here, and then select the top of the hierarchy, click it, and then say yes, change all my children, because you want all of these objects to be in that layer. The other thing we need to do to use the mocking system is make sure that our camera ignores that layer, because as you can see now in the preview, it's rendering this stuff, and when we run it on the phone, we don't want a floating little room to appear. So what we do is we come into the culling mask and we turn off that layer so that in the camera preview it's not there. But when we run this in the editor, what you'll see is that the room is here. So we've got this geometry, which is what we wanted. And as you just saw, that wasn't working just then. Like, it should have been placing cubes when I was clicking, and there should have been a cursor. So let's have a look at what settings I've missed. So if we quickly jump back into the plane manager, so you can see it says nothing. We probably want everything. You could select horizontal or vertical if you wanted a particular plane. So let's set that to everything. So that's the first problem. The second one, the cursor wasn't rendering, so let's look at what we're doing here. So I selected a small cube here and said that that's what I wanted to instance. The problem is that that's not in the scene. So in the case of the hit tester, this should be fine because we're placing a prefab to instance each time we click. But for the cursor, it wants to move an existing object around. So for this particular script, the way it's written, which again, you can just drop into scripts and have a look when you want to find out what's going on, it is expecting a game object to be passed in from the scene. So we just need to make a cube in here. So let's create a cube. Let's make it a bit smaller than that because that's quite large. Let's make it 0.1 in all of the dimensions. So that's a reasonable size for a cursor, and let's just zero it out just for neatness. Then what we want to do is just give this a name so we can find it easy. Cursor will do, and then we go back to our script. Instead of this small cube, we want to go into the scene and just find that cursor object that we just made, select that, do a quick save, and if we run this time, everything should be working. We should see that the planes are detected with a nice effect. So if I move the camera in, yep. So that was the effect that we added on the planes. There's the cursor cube that we just added that moves around with us. And if I click, yes, there we go, we get the small cubes that we wanted to place, and I can indeed place them anywhere. Now that you've seen this all running in the editor, this is great, it's all working, it's all magic. I should be able to place things up there too. We can also test on device, which basically means this tutorial is done. You've learned how to do placement. So I will build for iOS, which will take a moment, and then I'll show you it running. And here we go, it's just launching on the phone. And there you go, we're all up and running. I can place things and it's all working on the phone. So with that, that's the end of the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and have fun playing with ARDK.